Hello, everyone. Hope you are doing well. As the title of this space implies, anything goes. We can talk about anything. I imagine we'll probably talk about Yay. I have a few things to say, and I won't. I'll probably do this for an hour or so, so we'll keep everything tidy. Um, so a few thoughts on the whole thing. Um, these are more kind of like power dynamics more than anything, but I think they are important. So a lot of people are being let back on to Twitter. And I've seen a number of these accounts. Uh, to be frank, they're not really accounts that I like. And I wouldn't mind if they never came back. But Um, I also value the idea of having a clear terms of service and, you know, you play ball with the TOS, you get to stay on, and really focusing on destroying bot traffic and promoting an authentic account. I think that's overall a good thing. And Musk hasn't always lived up to his own principles, but well, there it is. One of these accounts that was a let back on, among various other kind of paleo conservatives and Catholics and so on, one of the accounts that was pretty notable was Andrew Anglin. So, Anglin, as I'm sure you know, is probably one of the most notorious people on earth, I guess. Um, and kind of fascinating in that way to be objective about things. He was very much into conspiracy theories. Uh, of note, someone who's researched him told me that his first ever post was actually anti NATO. Make of that what you will. Might very well just be a coincidence. He, of course, got into neo Nazism and then got into the Trump movement. And I can't even remember all of the different uh, fads, I guess is the best way to describe them, that he's gotten into over the years. White Sharia, I remember that one. The attack on e girls. We're just conservatives. Uh, I think he had a banner saying this is Ronald Reagan's favorite website. I mean, there obviously is a lot of genuine humor involved in this, and on and on and on. I remember a good friend of mine was staying with me about, let's say, a year and a half ago, and we were reliving over a drink the alt right days. And I very rarely visited Andrew England's website. I would kind of only do it at times like this, actually. And I was thinking, like, I wonder what he's saying. We visited the Daily Stormer, and literally every blog was on vaccines. So I guess not surprisingly, almost inevitably, when you look back at it, he went with every kind of right wing extremist fad, and vaccines was the next one. I know for certain, actually, someone sent me this link that he is very much on board the Yay movement. So I was thinking, now I'm just going to look at the power dynamics of this. I'm not really going to make a value judgment or anything. So someone sent me a link to his latest, and I saw every it was almost like entering a time machine. It just took me back to the crazy alt right days. Now, to be fair here, on the one hand, there is a kind of uh, wonderful craziness about the memeology of people like Andrew Anglin. There's just a certain silliness, maybe esoteric quality, or uh, I don't even know how to describe it, a certain style of these memes that is funny and outlandish. But of course, I'm being overly fair in saying that. I think maybe at best at this point, this kind of deranged teenager anime masturbator aesthetic is maybe useless at best. And there is something about it that when you start looking at these memes, it kind of, I don't know, gets you in the mind of a serial killer. It's rather creepy. And Yeah, I'll just say that. There's something genuinely creepy about it. But anyway, he is totally on board the A train. He was also allowed back onto Twitter very recently. I think 3 days ago, let's say. Now, I think there's some interesting power dynamics going on here. And so I'm going to evaluate people and their actions in terms of what are they trying to promote, and not necessarily, do they have principles, or is this part of a policy that's universal, etc. So there has been a move to DeSantis that happened actually long before the midterms, and the anti-Trump animus that we saw crop up right after that. I remember Joe Rogan said, "Oh, I'm into DeSantis," and he kind of dissed Trump a bit. This was, who knows, 6 months ago, long before the midterms. Um, Elon seems to be putting his lot in with, let's call them, the alt-right. So he had this space that the other day, that I didn't listen to the whole thing. I listened to a few highlights, but I can just say the only way to describe it is utterly embarrassing. Here we have a man who's a billionaire who probably doesn't get called a genius these days, but certainly a year ago, he had people eating out of the palm of his hand and declaring him a genius. He's going to save the world from global warming and pollution and send us to Mars to boot, etc. And he's hanging out with e-grifters and lowlifes, and people who are this best described really as alt-right. They kind of use some of the Anglin or 4chan terminology. They pick up on some of the memes, but it's all more Republican friendly and kind of defensible. You could deflect away from any serious intent involved. And here you have this billionaire talking with him. I mean, it's just incredible on some level. The level of slumming kind of can't be underestimated. And there's some other factors involved, particularly with Kim.com, this wacky character, and national security concerns over Russia, but who knows about that? So, on one level, if we just look at these data points and we say, all right, Trump is he's a Republican now. He's overtly telling you to vote Republican, and he's on the DeSantis train. Is bringing back Anglin, could that be understood as kind of part of that motivation? That whatever you want to say about Anglin, and I don't think Elon endorses Anglin by any stretch of the imagination. Nevertheless, that crazy alt-right Dionysian energy coincided, at the very least, with Trump's election in 2016, and might very well have been a decisive factor in his election, which was a Hail Mary pass to begin with and somehow was completed for a touchdown. You might not like it, and I'm not just saying this to be PC or something. I genuinely don't think Elon would endorse any of that stuff. You might not like it, but you might need it. And but what's kind of fascinating about this is when we think about it in terms of Yeism, is that Yeism has kind of broken the alt right to a very large degree. So one of the things that we saw or heard with Ye's appearance on Alex Jones is that Alex Jones kept offering him some kind of out, some kind of way to pretend that this is all a troll, or that he in fact doesn't think Hitler is cool. And so he would say things like, "Oh, you must be trolling there, yay." Or he would say things like, "Well, really, the Nazis are uh, involved with the Global Economic Forum and the World Bank, and so this is really what you're talking about," and various things like that. And Ye never took the bait, and he basically said, "No, the Holocaust didn't happen. Hitler was cool. I love all people in this Christian way, but I love Hitler especially." Was again his message. So he kind of deflected away from Alex Jones, and I think kind of as Stardust said when I was did a stream with her, he kind of broke Alex Jones. Like the programming didn't work anymore because Ye, excuse me, was being so brutally authentic. In other words, he actually believes this stuff. And there's another aspect about Yeism that I think is very significant, which is that back in 2016, Trump was kind of a mainstream Republican at least, or he was being promoted by traditional Republican operatives. Roger Stone, for instance, and Geo Proud, a gay Republican group that was at the time working with CPAC, got his first speech at CPAC in whenever it was 2014 or something like this. And Trump hired some, well, not exactly the best and the brightest, but he hired some pretty traditional Republican aides, you know, uh, Corey Lewandowski, Katrina Pearson, idiots, but not alt right people. And so the alt right was always kind of tangential. It was riding the wave of Trump, and it was at most tangentially connected to it. What I see with Ye, and I think this is actually a huge problem, in fact, is that Yeism is fully operated by these certain alt-right people. Now, Nick Fuentes is most obvious because he's, hanging out with him. He's appearing alongside him on Alex Jones. But I think Nick Fuentes is actually kind of the least of Ye's problems. Nick Fuentes, look, I have very strong, profound disagreements with Nick Fuentes. And, you could call him a grifter. I guess everyone could be called a grifter on some level. But I actually do think that Nick is operating in good faith. I think he actually believes the Catholic stuff. And I think he believes in the nationalism as well. And he kind of melds them together in his mind. But the other people surrounding Ye are, I would say, far worse than Fuentes. Because whatever you want to say, again, I do think that Fuentes is operating in this, not necessarily to win, but to promote himself and his ideas. But that's kind of, you see it. But the Ali Alexander, Ali Akbar, is fully embedded with the campaign. Milo resigned. Who knows? There was probably some intrigue or drama behind that. But Milo was there at the beginning. And it's very easy to believe that Milo has very bad intentions and that he was he might very well have been motivated, at least in part, to destroy Trump or show him up or sabotage him, etc. Milo is a lying sociopath. Laura Loomer's there. Now, Laura Loomer, I probably would put closer to Fuentes. You know, I do think she's more kind of what you see is what you get. But then you can kind of go. It's fully operational by these internet people, and I I think there are some major problems with that. I think that's one of the reasons why Yeism won't will have a very difficult time getting off the ground and might kind of go up in flames. But it is what it is. But at the very least, it's very interesting that that's the case because he's not a Republican candidate like Trump was. He really is the internet candidate, pure internet candidate. And I think this is interesting, again, from the level of power dynamics. After the midterms on November 8th, or whenever they were, early November, all you heard about was DeSantis. Oh my God, this is the Trump who can win. This is the smart Trump. The mainstream loved him. Oh, let's get rid of Trump. Let's go with DeSantis. Do you really hear about DeSantis anymore? I think he, much like Alex Jones, has been kind of broken by this. I think he's almost irrelevant. Even Trump himself is being rendered almost irrelevant by Yeism because Yeism is so hot and so authentic. Trump can rant on Truth Social about how we should suspend the Constitution, and people don't pay it much mind, nor should they, to be honest. It just sounds stupid. And so all of that, after the midterms, I was saying, and after Trump gave his announcement address a week later, I was saying, being a mainstream Republican just really isn't going to work for Donald Trump. You can talk about the stock market being up, line go up back in 2019 or something. No one ultimately cares. That's not how he got elected. That's not why he developed a cult of personality. That's just ultimately not going to work for him. And so one thing, say what you will about Ye, the fact that he's this like pure, like dissident right internet candidate, it's actually a powerful thing because I think it makes his competitors irrelevant. Now, I don't think Ye, excuse me, I keep calling him K, combining Kanye and Ye. I don't think Ye is going to run in the Republican primary, and I don't ultimately think he can win, if I'm just being a pundit here. But he can be powerful, and if he sucks up all of the dark magic, I think that's actually going to directly affect the Republican outcome because at the end of the day, the Republicans actually need that stuff to win. Republican consultants and the establishment, they can tell themselves all day long that DeSantis is America's governor and he's so lovable and he's so smart or whatever. I hate to break it to them, but they are living in their own delusional world. There is a huge percentage of the country, much larger than the percentage that would be defined as a conservative activist, who dislike DeSantis and might even dislike him rather intensely. And he's associated with stuff they dislike or have contempt for. The Martha's Vineyard stunt, attacks against Disney, which have been apparently reversed over the past few days, all this kind of stuff. He kind of has all the culture war baggage, which might make him popular, but is ultimately going to prevent him from winning. He doesn't have any of the magic, the dark magic. And just on a personal level, he's just very unattractive. And the fact that conservatives can't see that maybe tells us something about themselves. But anyway, that's just kind of my thoughts on the matter. To sum up, Ye, it's not quite like Trump because it's not like 4chan or the alt right or all the dark magic, merchants deciding that we're gonna jump onto Trump and we're gonna kind of project our dark magic onto him. It's that those people have gotten access to a billionaire and they are doing it themselves. They are the ones operating that thing. If anything, it does not benefit the Republican Party, and it certainly doesn't benefit Trump. And in a way, it makes Trump and even DeSantis, a kind of false Trump, just irrelevant. It just blows them out of the water. They get broken by it because of Ye's brutal honesty, you could say. So anyway, these were just a few things that I was thinking about. If you guys would like to talk, you can. We have 150. That's pretty good. Please just request and I will let you speak and we can talk about this. All right. Okay. Yakub Orowski.
Oh, hi, everyone.
Hey.
Well, my first reaction to this was basically that it wasn't going anywhere. Like, where is Ye's trajectory other than getting on the Alex Jones show? Like, wasn't that the telos of all of this? But then I
Yeah, I
realized,
kind of agree. Okay, go finish your thought. Finish your
yeah,
thought.
I guess I'll tell my little story here. But then I recalled the Give Me Five campaign of Gary Johnson, five being 5% in polls that gets him into presidential debates as a third wheel like Ross Perot. Perhaps the campaign commission or the TV stations or whoever could ban him in an undemocratic way. Maybe there could be legal challenges. I don't know how this works exactly. But I'm just thinking, even if it's only extremely online, young white men, Ye could break 5% in a poll pretty easily, it seems.
Yes.
He could.
And it's not just extremely online white men who would support him.
Yeah,
By the way,
there
like,
are a
go
lot
on.
of black people. There are
Yeah.
a lot, all the Nation of Islam, Black Hebrew Israelites, the trad cats, basically everything anti-Semitic, which, I mean, doesn't the ADL claims, I mean, with more or less fair surveys that, I mean, there are anti-Semitic feelings among what? 1 in 5 Americans? Is that a reasonable number? 20%,
Yeah.
maybe 10%. I think that's reasonable. Yeah, he could absolutely be to Trump 24 what Ross Perot was to Bush 92. If someone doesn't get in the way, we could have a bipolar, psychotic, black Christian anti-Semite on the debate stage with
Yeah.
possibly Trump and Biden. It's hard to believe, but that could plausibly happen. And I'm kind of wondering how that might be stopped and can it be stopped?
Yeah, this is all very good analysis. I hadn't really thought about it in this way. Now, one thing here, I would presume if you're going to be on the big debate stage where millions are watching, there's also a rule that you have to be on the ballot. And the Libertarian Party, say what you will about them, they are an actual entity, that is on the ballot in 50 states, I would imagine. And so, if you win that nomination, you've got that built in infrastructure. And so I don't know. I mean, to get on the ballot, they are going to need to start right now. They are going to need to hire these competent bureaucratic people to get this done. It is not, uh, I couldn't get it done. I'm not good with this stuff. They need highly competent, experienced people to do that. And, like Nick Fuentes is not going to be able to do that. And that's not even a criticism, really. But can you find such people? Maybe. But they need to get on that very early because I agree. There is a tendency of this yayism to kind of like drift over into you went on Alex Jones and then you'll be back on Alex Jones in 6 months, or you'll do a Twitch stream that makes people crazy, but there's just kind of diminishing returns in that. I mean, this was a genuine happening on Friday. It was totally insane. Everyone was talking about it, but you just can't. I mean, how many times can you say Hitler is cool before it starts to wear off and the shock value is over? So, again, getting on the ballot is not just, you don't just fill out a form. Like, it is very difficult. It's difficult for a reason. There is a two-party conspiracy to prevent third parties, basically. So yeah, I mean, you point out all these good things, and then also these good points, rather. Also, what you say, I mean, it's very interesting, and I think I've talked about this before, but I can remember talking with white nationalists over the past. Again, I'm very much out of the scene at this point, but I can remember talking to these guys, and they would basically they had an assumption, which was, well, don't ever really talk about the JQ. That's a little too complex and, makes you seem nasty, etc. But we've got to win over, middle American white Christians. So just talk about kind of immigration or the anti-white hatred and race and all that kind of stuff, black crime. We'll kind of win them over and then red pill them later or something. That was their assumption. And what you're getting at is actually kind of fascinating, which is that there is a kind of one snuggle coalition of Catholics, Muslims, many black people, online incels, where they can just kind of focus on the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, the Jews. And, you're not going to win that way, but that actually is a large contingent. That's a large portion of the population. And it does strike me as fascinating where, back in 2016, you could at least plausibly say that Trump was running a white nationalist campaign. It was all about, white people are left out. He didn't say that exactly, but people got the message, his critics and supporters alike. And it was like, the real Americans are left out, and we're going to end immigration and build the wall, et cetera. And it's interesting how if we take Yeism seriously, and it's not just a flash in the pan. It's interesting how this is almost evolving into something else where there is actually a multiracial, Abrahamic, though multi-faith, but I would say entirely Abrahamic, ironically, anti-Semitic coalition. I mean, it's remarkable. Let's just say that.
It is. I guess, yeah, the ballot issue is important. I wonder if they could have the numbers for a yay party, or maybe the yayists could raid the Constitution Party. I feel like the libertarians could hold them off.
The libertarians would hold them off. I mean, the libertarians would fight and die to prevent yayism, even though the New Hampshire Libertarian Party is they might have a contingent in favor. But I do think the Constitution. I mean, I think I have met someone from the Constitution Party at some point. These guys are Trump fans and Christian nationalists, I can tell. So it seems like they might weirdly be won over, although they would be kind of turning their party over to usurpers. But nevertheless, they seem to be like that. I mean, that would be the shortest distance between 2 points. Would be you don't have to hire a staff of 20 like secretaries to do all this mind-numbingly complex, work to get on the ballot, and knowing that you're going to kind of like forget to sign a form or not get it notarized or not have enough signatures, and then they'll be like, oh, you can't run in Alabama or whatever. Because again, there is, genuinely speaking, a conspiracy against third parties. If you could jump on the Constitution Party, I presume that they are on the ballot in many, if not all, states. That would definitely be the shortest distance between 2 points. Now, that's going to be a bunch of just speculating here, but
Libertarian Party is the only one that's on the ballot
is
in all
that true?
states. Besides the Republicans and Democrats, none of the other third parties are.
Okay, thank you for that. But the Constitution Party is on the ballot in many states, right?
Yes.
Okay. Who knows where this will go? And it would be it's kind of interesting because if they took over the Constitution Party, it would be displacing these old, like, fat lawyers, old white fat lawyers who have been doing all this, this paleo conservative stuff for a while. And it would be kind of replacing them with the new anti-Semites who are going to be, again, multi-faith, although entirely Abrahamic, and multiracial, but ultimately doing the same thing. And yeah, it's going to be a massive contradiction, but that's never stopped people before. Like there was a funny point in the Alex Jones hour where he's like, we should have a Bill of Rights party, the First Amendment or whatever. And, it seems redundant or whatever. But anyway, and then Nicholas Fuentes chimed in, and I think he was endorsed by Ye, saying, well, actually, we want a Christian nationalist party and not necessarily the Bill of Rights. And then later on, Ali Akbar said, as a Catholic, we'll ban heresy. And then Jones just kind of melds all these things. It's like, yeah, well, that's got to come first. But, basically, it's a bunch of people who fetishize these documents and don't, they do have a vision of sorts, but it's so inchoate and contradictory and kind of ultimately fatuous that they just fetishize these documents. Like, this is what the founders wanted, kind of stuff. I've seen this a lot. But anyway, that would all be fascinating. Or they could, what I suggested that might happen is that this becomes kind of a movement and not really a party. And it's about Ye, and it's a kind of tent revival movement for the 21st century. And so it's, music, big speeches about the Jewish media, and just kind of a big feel-good affair. All right. We have a lot of requests here. I'll just let everyone on, and then I will go down the list. Good, 187. That's a good number for an impromptu space. Okay. I believe, Werner, you were the next in line. And then I might go kind of random, so if I just bear with me. But Werner, you're up.
Okay. I wish there was someone who was more intelligent than Ye, who was a celebrity or something, because I don't know, Ye's just kind of dumb.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I really don't. I've never liked Ye's music. I mean, to be fair, I haven't listened to all of it. He's he does have. I mean, to be fair to him, he does have a bit of an artistic soul, and he kind of connects things that are logically incoherent but kind of rhyme. But yeah, yeah. But sometimes features are bugs, as I like to say. I mean, the fact that he went on the Alex Jones program wearing a mask is probably going to appeal to more people than you can imagine. And this hope for, an intelligent person talking about issues seriously, it's kind of a false hope. Populism, it is populism. It has to be popular. It has to speak to people where they are. This is where they are.
Well, right now, Ye, there are articles in the New York Times, the front page of the New York Times about him, but 1 month from now,
you're breaking
that will
up
not be.
From me. Is that for everyone?
Can you hear me now?
No, he's not breaking up at all.
Oh, he isn't. Okay, maybe that's just for me then. Keep speaking then.
Okay, but a month from now, he's not going to be the top story anymore. He has to come up with something new that's outrageous that it hasn't already said, sort of like Trump's campaign in 2016. And so I think eventually he's no longer going to be receiving mainstream media coverage. And of course, he's been, unlike other third-party candidates like Gary Johnson, he's been deplatformed and debanked. So he doesn't even is talking about no bank will do business with him anymore. So there are much more difficult for him than any other, third-party candidate like the Green Party or Libertarians or something like that.
Yes.
So I'm pessimistic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I think it's going to get old. I think going on Alex Jones or going on some Twitch stream and just saying kind of the same stuff over and over, at some point people will tire of it. I agree. But what are they going to really offer? I mean, if they come up with their platform, don't you think that might even be almost like worse? I mean, they're going to come up with a Christian nationalist platform, right?
Yes. So then why? I don't know. I mean, do you support him?
No.
Okay, me neither.
I respect the power of what he's doing, and I also think he's authentic. I doubt I would.
Are you correlating Christian nationalists with Hitler?
No. I think those are separate things.
Oh, okay.
Horseshoe, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't hear Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I didn't hear the very beginning of this conversation, but I did hear you talking about kind of the coalition, the kind of
Yes.
Abrahamic coalition. And I do just want to, because I do think actually you understand this issue pretty well, given your own experience, that there are the various arguments that people might make on this rather unique public policy issue. And I would argue it is a truly unique public policy issue. It's not like, I mean, even people will compare it to race, people will compare it to gender. It really is its own issue for various reasons. And there are the salient arguments that you can make. And then there are the arguments that people want to make, right? And there are the arguments that motivate people. And I would argue the religious arguments are the salient arguments that people are allowed to make. They're really the only ones you're really allowed to make. Because if you even touch lightly on any of the other just kind of issues that are, I mean, really just kind of descriptive facts about the way the world works, it's almost like hitting over a tripwire. And the religious issue does the same, but in a way where I think to most people is it's more obvious how little you have to do to be called a kind of hateful, evil Nazi, really, when it comes to the religious arguments because of where they're coming from. So I just wanted to add that because I am kind of familiar with this coalition in particular, and I do think that many people are sincerely, I mean, that is a motivating factor for them, but part of the reason why you see such diversity on this issue is because there are just like real facts about the world that that once you notice them and you are identified as noticing them, or even you yourself notice them, you can't unnotice them once you articulate that you've noticed them.
Let's allow the rubber to hit the road. Okay, you can talk about these things in an objective manner that's not going to get you banned. Okay. What was that? Oh, okay.
Man, what was that?
I don't know what that was. Okay.
I think
you can talk about these things in a coherent and objective manner that's not going to get you banned. So what you're talking about is, say, Jewish people are overrepresented in the media on Wall Street and Hollywood, etc. Right? And
I'm not really talking about I think you can definitely talk about that in a careful way, not too aggressively. Yes. I'm talking about actually, like, if you, in a way that's politically salient and actually moves things in any direction.
Right. I mean, I think that all of that is fair, and you can have a discussion about that, but it also kind of leads you to an impasse of what are you really going to do about that? I mean, the way to, quote, solve that problem would be, open state discrimination against people trying to be on Wall Street. And that's just not going to fly. And it's not going to fly especially if your basis is like constitutionalism and liberty or whatever. Now, you can talk about the religious thing, but I think that also kind of, maybe it was Nick, or I think it actually was Nick, but they were talking about the Talmud and things like this. And it just, there's probably some, there's some accuracy to what they're saying, but it gets to this point of like, look, I could, as a fedora-wearing atheist, I could tell you things about the Bible that are going to make you look like a maniac, And as a Christian, you absolutely integrate the Old Testament and many law of stoning and all sorts of things that you couldn't defend and wouldn't want to defend, and would just basically say like, well, look, it was a different time. And that's fair, but you then can't go and start, rather dubiously, to be honest, talking about the Talmud. I mean, it's just, I think all of these things are kind of non-starters, and that doesn't mean that you can't discuss them or that they might not be important, but they're really non-starters.
Yeah, I guess I'm not talking, I missed the part where this was specifically about the kind of public facing, like Kanye, Nick events. I do think that there's something there, right? So I do think that there's a way in which the standard to which you have to be articulate. So actually, let me think about it. So people, let's say Andrew Joyce, for instance, or anybody who is really, really articulate on this issue, very well versed on this issue, what happens to them? They're basically banned on a level that I think most people don't even understand, because they will never hear about them, right? He cannot have a Twitter account, even under Elon Musk. You know this. It's just, I think the thing is, like, I mean, the thing is that Kanye is the kind of person who gets to be, like, he's the best kind of person who's allowed to speak on this issue, and he is saying things that are not wrong. And Nick is probably, he's very articulate on this issue in a lot of ways. And the fact that he is a little erratic and provocative is, I think, honestly a protective thing in a way. I mean, the more you like follow this issue, I don't know. I mean, I've come to that conclusion. I'm not saying I agree with even half the stuff he says, but I think that it is part of why, like, he isn't, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I do think Andrew Joyce is a good counter there, right? He's somebody who, like, if he were allowed on Alex Jones, people would be very, very worried, and he's never going to be allowed to get to that level, right? And part of it is that that what has led him to have this knowledge is the fact that he has something on the line, right? He has an academic career. Like, you have to do kind of real scholarly research because so much has been censored, because there's a lot of history to the ignorance that people have on a lot of these issues. So, I mean, I don't want to take up a lot of space, but I do think that this is a unique public policy issue. And there are particular reasons why maybe the people who we hear very publicly are not always super articulate on this issue, even if what they're saying is true, for what it's worth.
Okay, that's fair enough. I actually have some disagreements with what you said, but I think a lot of this discussion is actually widely available and was published by mainstream publishing houses and so on. I think you kind of run up against this brick wall of like the non-starters of these arguments. And I don't, yeah.
Would you mind sharing like a non-starter or like something? I mean, I guess I'm very curious.
Well,
Yeah, that's what I'd like to. Yeah, that's what I'd like to know.
Well, I mean, I just discussed that. Like that's what I was saying. I mean, you can say, oh, the Jews are overrepresented here. Well, what can you do about that outside of actively discriminating against them through the government? And that is a huge brick wall, and it's also just a kind of like principled brick wall in terms of their own principles, which are like, taking back the Constitution and so on.
Well, the argument there is that there's ethnic nepotism happening there, right?
But that's not illegal.
So the thing is that we discriminate against whites who aren't Jewish already, right? In this, for the same, I guess I'm trying to understand, and I'm not, by the way, I'm not white, so I'm not saying that, and I'm also not Christian, but I do have, like, I'm an American, I have an interest in these issues, and I try to be objective, and I think that it's very obvious that that's what happens, and that. For instance, I went to an institution where a huge percentage for college and for law school, where a huge percentage of the white student body, like an enormous percentage that most Americans, again, would have, like, these are the most elite institutions in this country, a huge percentage are Jewish, and they're legacies. And so a lot of the legacies are also Jewish. And so I'm sorry, I don't mean to drone on, but this is the one point I do want to make. So, like, when you have conversations about these kinds of things, especially when it comes to elite status, when it comes to people at the very top of society, most Americans would think the legacies are like wasps, right? But at this point in history, many are. I would actually say I would like bet quite a lot that at least half at this point at Harvard, Yale, Princeton, they are Jewish. At least half of the legacy white students.
Okay, I don't know the exact numbers on that, but I'll just stipulate that. But what is your point?
I guess my point is that Jewish people are 2% of the population of this country. And I think for the white population of Americans in particular, I think a lot of the conversation, there is a discrimination against them, especially in the upper class, like, elements, or people who are aspirational. They really don't understand that there is a kind of ethnic nepotistic subgroup of white people, or phenotypically white.
Okay, I get that. I get your argument. But, like, do you understand the non-starter quality to that? Like, what can be done about that?
Why is it a non-starter?
Well, you can generate resentment or anger or outrage.
This is not resentment. I'm talking about a kind of corruption. This is corruption. This is not about. So I'm not talking about a resentment against Jews. I'm talking about ethnic nepotism is a kind of corruption, right? We talk about in African countries,
it's
right?
Absolutely legal. I mean, I guess you could maybe have an anti-discrimination suit or something. I mean, which is, I mean, for instance, the affirmative action bill in the Supreme Court is on behalf of Asian, and it might even be on only Asians, or maybe it's Asians and whites. So you could do that.
Yeah, and the reason why the focus of the sorry, go on.
Yeah, I mean, you just, like, I guess you could conceivably have a saying that there's ethnic discrimination going on behalf of Jews at elite colleges. I mean, you could conceivably do that.
Not
But
just
other than that, I don't see much of a starter. Like, do you
Well,
understand?
but
It's
those
like,
cases are very political, right? So why is it that Asian Americans are so theoretically, it could really be on behalf of white students, and there have been cases on behalf of white students. The reason why those cases are about Asian American students is not just because of the percentile discrimination against them. It's because it's the kind of case that might actually win, because the Supreme Court is a political institution, and politics, morals, right? These things all precede our laws, right? Like anybody studied the founding or like how our Constitution even came to be, which I know you have, right? You understand this, right? So like whether or not it's legal is one question. Our laws all get made, right? And I'd say that one thing I really do respect about this particular ethnic group is that the people who there are some people who are very sharp within this group who really understand that very well and have done a very good job shaping laws. And I do think that's important to know, right? They understand that the law does not come before morality, that the law doesn't come before public policy, that like morality and the motivated actors precede the actual laws we have on the books, and that those can always be changed. So I do think that's a good point to raise, right?
I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I mean, but what I am saying is that in terms of a political program of any kind, I don't see what you can do outside of like saying that we should have affirmative action plans on Wall Street and Hollywood. And again, possible, I guess. We'll see what happens with the Supreme Court this spring. But like, it just strikes me as a non-starter outside of generating a certain kind of outrage, you could say, at a situation that isn't talked about. But like, what can you actually do? I mean, you can say words like corruption and things like that. Fair enough, but that's not like you.
That's a starter.
Run for but if you're going to run for president, you have to have an actual agenda.
Well, I'm just trying to understand what it means when you're saying a non. So it is a starter. So right, like part of it is that it's a descriptive.
A starter would be illegal immigration is a big problem, and actually, we're giving there's too many immigrants. We should have Americans have those jobs, so we're going to reduce immigration by half.
Why is that a starter, and why is what I said a non-starter?
Because there is clearly. Oh, sorry, my kettle is ready. Because there's a clear policy that can articulate that. Like there is just you can absolutely say we want to reduce immigration by half next year. You can put that forward. It can be voted upon. It can win, and it will be implemented. But just saying there are many Jews at CNN, like what could you possibly do about that?
So, okay, so I do have an answer to this. I don't want to hog up a lot of time. So I'm going to give you, if you want to just take me off.
By all means, continue. No, I like what you're saying.
Well, this is my space. Go ahead.
So my answer to that would be, right, so if you believe, right, what people in this group that we're talking about believe, that there's a kind of reality to how the world works, to how power works, to how the American government works, to how our hegemonic kind of world system, right? So if you believe that there are essential facts about this system that most people do not understand, and that they need to understand to be informed voters, right, to decide what policies even make sense, then this all is a starter, right? It's the only kind of starter to actually describe the situation so that people can develop or can understand why one policy is actually better than another, or to understand like what policies actually make sense for that.
What you're saying, at least what I'm hearing, is that white people, or really any other ethnic group, should also act in this way. They should kind of have, groups, and they should kind of think about what's best for us, and they should act in that behalf. Okay, that's totally fair, but that's not a political program.
Sorry.
Thing. Go ahead.
So I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just like, that isn't exactly my starting point. Is I really just don't like liars. And one thing I have noticed in this issue is that there are a lot of liars. Like I've had a lot of fights on Twitter with, for instance, and his crew of people, and they lie a lot about facts that are verifiable. That if you've read the books that they talk about, if you know about historical events, I mean, I think he says a lot of good things too, right? So I see people like thumbing down. I liked him at first, but he does lie, right? You should always fact check him. Just fact check him. That's all. Like I'm not a liar, and I think
Okay.
yeah, that's all.
That's fair
Anyway,
enough.
but
Okay,
my point
thank
is
you.
really that that's my starting point. It's not just that you should be like Jews, right? Like that you should have or be like some people think Jews are, right? Like that you should also do the ethnic nepotism. It's just that we live in one world, right? And I do think that there's a singular truth, and that it's important to bring that truth to light, right? And a lot of these people do believe that, and that's part of why it is a coalition, right? Like they do believe there are true facts about the world that most people don't know, and that it's important to just be honest.
Fair enough. All right, thank you for your participation. All right, internet plus ideology. You're up.
Hi there again. I just wanted to say one thing about Ye that I don't know how often this has been commented on, but he made a reference to the Bible when he was speaking, and
he made many.
It was but it was specifically to Matthew verse 5, the one where it says, "Love for enemies." You know, you've heard it said, "Love your neighbor and hate your enemy." But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you.
Right.
That you
this
may
is
be
coming from the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah, so I'm an atheist, an apostate or whatever. But I was brought to church as a child, and I remember hearing this, and I remember it being, it's quite a radical teaching. And, Jesus was a radical figure.
Yes.
And it strikes me that in all the reporting in the mainstream media is very mendacious because they haven't looked at enough of the stream, or they don't care to put Ye's quote in context. He was saying, I love Hitler and I love the Nazis, but he also said, I love Zionists because they're attacking me, and you're being told.
True.
Yeah, and nobody's saying this. Like, and he's saying that he's a Christian.
All right. Now that is true, and I mean, I remember seeing the street preacher one time. I saw a video of him. I have seen some street preachers in my time, but I saw this on YouTube, and he was actually doing he was proselytizing in Pennsylvania shortly after the Penn State debacle involving child abuse with the football team, or the coach of the football team. He seemed to overlook this. He was Joe Paterno. He was a classic coach, and Jerry Sandusky was the criminal. And he actually said, someone said something like, well, surely Jerry Sandusky is in hell or something. And he said, I don't want Jerry Sandusky to be in hell. I want him to be saved. And even if, we all agree that child abuse is worse than, say, lusting in your heart or something, in some ways, from a radical Christian perspective, in some ways it's not. They're both sins. You're both worthy of damnation because you lusted after a girl you saw on the street, or you engaged in, criminal, horrible child abuse. And he said, I want him to be saved. And to his credit, I think that actually was a radical, almost just unacceptable, but in many ways very principled, representation of Christianity. We're all terrible. I think there was an element of that to Ye, but let's also just be honest here. I mean, sometimes your first impression is correct. He said, I love all people, but especially Hitler. Hitler did many good things. Let's stop calling Nazis evil. I mean, he was, there is that Christian element to it, but come on. In other words, the liberals were kind of right to be freaked out and to basically say that he was promoting Hitlerism. Let's be honest.
Yeah, but I think the thing is, well, why is this the one group that you're not allowed praise, or why is it such a sin in the modern world to say anything good about the Nazis or Hitler? And I think it shows that the West is no longer Christian, and that makes sense when, like, I was reading Andrew Doyle's new book called The New Puritans, which asserts that social justice and critical race theory and all that's our new religion. And in a way, even though most people might, even a plurality of people might say that they're Christians now, that's not their religion. The new religion is wokeism, So in wokeism, and with the founding myth of like American exceptionalism, is that the Holocaust is the supreme evil. Therefore, the Nazis and Hitler were the supreme evil, and the US-led international order is the force for good in the world. And so if you question that at all, you're questioning the founding myth of America. And also, even though it's 77 years since the end of the Second World War, we still have to genuflect to the founding myth. And like so, but when, I suppose, Ye's point, I think, is when will it be okay to criticize it? And this ties back, I think, to your previous speaker, who says that, like, because of Jewish control, or because of their partial control on the levers of power, and their interest in helping Israel, that's another angle why it's impossible to criticize this power. And also from a lefty perspective, which I grew up a lefty, any sort of ethnic nepotism, it makes a mockery on the idea of the meritocratic state, which I think most people believe in. So you're taught one thing about your world, but your world actually works another way. So I think it's the hypocrisy and corruption that just reeks at this point, That's basically what there's a few ideas there.
I think also the fact that it is being questioned says something about the American empire as well, kind of losing its form of legitimacy. Much like the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union ended up in the 70s justifying itself on the basis of we fought the Nazis. And I think there was a kind of moral center to American empire that was very similar. I've said it before. I think liberalism, it is this kind of, at least ostensibly, or at least it understands itself as kind of value free. When you say like we need to protect democracy and whatever, well, it's like, well, what exactly are you protecting? Like I hate to sound like Lysander Spooner here or something, but if 51% of the public decided to kill 49% of the public, would you want to protect democracy? Now, obviously, there are reasons why something like that could never happen, but you understand my point. There's a kind of value-free quality to it. And, liberals, I think, really fail at promoting something outside of some kind of like new form of self-expression. And they don't really have anything. Now, I think conservatives are kind of foggy, to say the least, about what exactly they want. But, liberals are in a position where they are in leadership. The conservatives are kind of right, or very much right, when they're saying, like, we don't control these institutions. All the liberals are in control of everything, from the church to Walmart to the U.S. government to the State Department to so on, to Wall Street, so on. It's all these liberals in charge, and I get it, but they're in this position where they can't really articulate what they stand for outside of maybe self-expression and kind of harm avoidance. And that isn't going to cut it. I mean, particularly when you're in charge of these institutions, you have to assert a value system. And the fact that liberals kind of can't bring themselves to do that outside of like basic, harm avoidance and self-expression. I would say that's where it's at. I think that's actually a real big problem for them. And Ye, like, putting aside the controversy of what he said and putting aside whether you agree with particular points that he said, the fact that, people are fascinated by, and he's openly questioning American myths, that says something about the stability of the American empire. 20 years ago, there wasn't there was an Alex Jones program, but it was, confined to the radio waves. But there wasn't, not 20 years ago, everyone wasn't talking about this, black rapper who's become a Nazi and thinks the Holocaust didn't happen. I mean, it's unthinkable. And the fact that this is happening and seemingly happening organically is remarkable. And I think it says something about like the failing of the US empire.
Yeah, that's a lot to take in. They're very good points. Another thing I kind of wanted to say is, if you get, I don't know if people have pointed this out before. I mean, it's a pretty obvious point, which is that if you have a black man and a white supremacist sat next to each other, and also a Jewish guy when Milo was still around, but even Laura Loomer, then people will be like, wait, I thought Nick Fuentes was meant to be a white supremacist, but he's, hanging out with Ye, and I also thought he was meant to be anti-Semitic, and yet, he's hanging out with Milo and Laura Loomer. And, then again, it's like these little contradictions that keep bubbling up that eventually people will go, hang on a second, I just think if enough people...
I would tell you, hang on a second. Do you think Nick Fuentes isn't a racialist? Or do you think Nick Fuentes isn't anti-Semitic?
It's I don't know. I mean,
have you listened?
No, I mean, I've listened to, yes, a lot, but in
well, what is he then?
Well, I don't really know. He's a bit of an enigma. I mean, you can tell the people who are properly, I think, racist and anti-Semitic because they have this like proper loathing. Whereas, I don't know if it's his humor or, but I mean, if you wouldn't hang out with, Jews and blacks and whatever, would you? I mean, that just strikes me as odd in the non-think of it.
I don't find it so odd.
Oh, okay.
I would say this internet ideology, if I am ever on trial for anything, I really hope that you would be my judge.
Oh, really?
Because you'd allow me to get away with anything.
Oh, I don't know if that's a compliment.
A bit of one, I guess.
Can I say one more thing before you boot me off? So I was listening to Scott Ritter, one of his recent interviews, and he was talking to a peace activist, and they were saying, well, what's your assessment of the state of America? And he said, America's fucked because the blob has taken over. And he said that realistically speaking, the only thing possible at the moment is a revolution. And he said, but I couldn't stand by anybody who wanted to throw away the Constitution, because for me, America is the Constitution and the Constitution is America. So I think that if you and I think he's right, because the vested interests won't allow you to remake the system. And we saw that with Donald Trump, even when he was picking his cabinet and he picked somebody like John Bolton. It's like, or eventually picked John Bolton. It's like the system won't allow you to change its parameters. Right. They're kind of locked in. So even you know, if when you're talking about the optics of what like Ye will do with his presidential run and whatever, it's like that doesn't really matter in the end, does it? Is my point.
I understand that. I would say any system is going to operate in that way. Yeah, I mean, whatever I said about liberals like not being able to assert something, and also the system falling into a kind of decline where it almost can't assert things, and nevertheless, it's going to fight for its life. You know, it's going to defend itself. I mean, if I were in a elite position, I would absolutely fight for the continuation of the system that I benefit from. So you can't really blame it. But I think you can just look. I mean, again, I'm kind of standing back from this stuff. I do see this as like expressing a weakness in the system, not necessarily causing it, but really expressing a major weakness. But anyway, thank you for your comments. And if you want to say one last thing, you can.
Well, it just popped into my head just when you were talking there. Do you know the concept of autopoiesis?
Autopoiesis? No.
It's from Maturana and Varela, and Niklas Luhmann, the social theorist, used it to explain how systems work. And autopoiesis is the idea that a system basically, once it constitutes itself, it just wants to continue to be. That's basically it. So you would say that they're autopoietic systems, but Luhmann also said that in our modern society, he says that it's functionally differentiated and it's made up of a system. It's made up of a network of interconnected autopoietic systems. And each of the centers has its own logic. So he would have said the criminal and penal system is one such system, and the science system is one such system, and the art system is one such system, and that each system at its core has an opposition. Lawful and unlawful, for instance, is the binary opposition at the heart of the legal and penal system.
Right.
And then each of these systems operates independently from each other and interacts with all the other systems, but each of them, its primary purpose is to just maintain itself.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I agree. I totally agree. I think it's almost...
He was a student of Talcott Parsons.
Yeah. I mean, I think in a way saying this is almost like, tautological or something like, yes, like we live in a certain system. We're not free. I don't know. I guess maybe I'm so cynical none of that really surprises or bothers me.
Okay.
Well, thank you for your comments, and
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Talk again.
Yes. I will go first to the Leper King, Dark Lord of the Sith. Wow, man after my own heart.
Hey, what's going on, Richard? How you doing?
Doing well.
Yeah, it's funny, man. I was thinking about your conversation the other day. First I wanted to comment on the Nick Fuentes question about whether he is anti-Semitic, and I would say what he is Christian. I think people have lost. They really truly don't understand Christianity, but Christianity at its heart, I mean, if the term anti-Semitic means anti-Jewish, I mean, you don't usually get called an anti-Semite for saying something about a Palestinian, but so it's really not, it's more of an anti-Jewish term than anything else, but Christianity is based on anti-Semitism, if you want to put it flatly. So it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that Christianity has built into it these kind of safety valves to react against this system that basically takes advantage of certain practices that Christians withhold themselves from, such as like usury or basically a lot of the degenerate things you see in our society today. But that's not really what I wanted to comment on. I wanted to talk about with you about.
Well, I have to say, I find this notion exceedingly ridiculous.
In which way?
The notion that Christianity is based on, I mean, Christianity, it is founded by Christ, right? Jesus Christ.
Who called the Jews the children of the devil, the father of all lies.
Where does salvation come from according to Jesus?
Faith.
No, he says very explicitly where salvation comes from.
Salvation comes
Have you
from
read the
faith
Gospels?
in Christ. If you believe in Christ, you have to believe in the Son to go to the Father. That's what.
Don't give me Catholicism. Give me what Jesus actually said. Where does
You
salvation
tell me
come
what
from?
did Jesus say directly?
It comes from the Jews. And
Salvation
he said that
comes
explicitly.
from the Jews.
Look it up.
Well, I mean, if you want to get the terminology into that, we can also argue that the true Israel is the followers of Jesus Christ. So, I mean, there's a lot in terms of terminology.
Well, yeah, but it was Jesus certainly went after the Pharisees. And in like the book of John, you could kind of read that as anti-Semitic. That's where
what
you get
about
all
St.
these,
Paul?
Who was also Jewish.
Yeah, but this is the thing, when people kind of push that into a gray zone. I mean, when someone accepts Christ, they're no longer Jewish. You don't see someone today, a Jewish person, accepting Christ and still being recognized as Jewish. It just doesn't happen. It's like you believe in the Messiah, and you accept Jesus Christ as the Messiah, or you reject him. Basically, what a Jew is one that believes in a Messiah and rejected Jesus Christ. That's what it is. What they are.
But
that's what it's based on.
Christianity is
so once you accept Jesus Christ, you're no
itself.
longer a Jew.
Well, yeah, but I agree with you on some level, but like Christianity, what I am stressing is that Christianity is a fulfillment of Judaism. And
I agree with that. I agree with that.
Many people, the notion of a Messiah, Christ just means Messiah in Greek.
Yeah.
The notion of a Messiah is not like a Roman concept or whatever. It is a Jewish concept, and he is fulfilling Jewish prophecy.
Yeah, and yes, exactly. And you bring Christianity is basically, you bring that together with Greek philosophy, and you've got Christian doctrine.
Right. But I guess what I would stress is that there's a peculiar Christian anti-Semitism that you are kind of angry at Jews for not, in some ways, being Jewish enough. Like there's a particular dynamic to Christian anti-Semitism that I think is very different than, if I don't know much about it, but if we were to imagine, say, Chinese anti-Semitism, it doesn't have that same dynamic, and it's very peculiar.
This is what I mean. It's hard to. If you study Christian history, Christianity, the Catholic Church, has been the most prevalent. Basically, the doctrine of Sicut Judaeus non, which is they can live within our society, but they can't basically affect the religion, the faith of our people, and we can't harm them. So it's always been an attempt at peace, but an attempt at conversion at the same time. And I think a failure of the Catholic Church is that they stopped trying to convert the Jews. But that's a side note as well. But what I really wanted to get to with you is that you were talking about the basically there's parallels that right now, even though you are not a Christian, there are parallels in terms of the vehicle that Christianity can provide to basically bring forth the same aims you are looking for yourself, in my opinion, in terms of this country and in terms of basically setting up in a situation where, I personally don't believe in democracy as we have it today. I think the people are completely not educated enough to vote. I think we need a system where we actually have representatives that are knowledgeable individuals and not just subservient to different interest groups or, basically the gist of what I was saying. And what you
so who are kind of the people who resonate most with Christian nationalism who are currently in Congress?
I would say basically none of them. I'd say the ones in the political system
Well,
right
some
now.
have spoken out about how they are, in fact, Christian nationalists.
Well, I think a lot of them are trying to kind of get in front of that bandwagon. They see where the tide's going. It's the same
isn't
with
it
Trump calling himself a
remarkable
Christian.
that
He calls
the
himself a
two
Christian.
biggest idiots resonate with what you're saying?
What do you mean?
Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert.
Why do they? Well,
if
I
you
guess
had
it's because
Christian
if you win the Christian
like,
vote,
that's
if you
what
can
it would
win
look
it,
like.
If
Like,
you can win a
I'm
certain
just
amount
saying.
of it, you can win all of it.
Like, it's nice to think of it as some like great thing that's going to advance civilization, but when the rubber hits the road, it means being governed by MTG. I mean, I'm sorry
with that.
So it does not fulfill.
See, I
desires.
I look at it differently. I would think in an actual Christian situation, she wouldn't be in power at all because a man should not suffer himself to be ruled over by a woman. Like if we're talking about real Christianity, women won't be in government.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people don't understand. Like people don't understand where this reaction is going.
I mean, Paul does not want women to be leaders of the church, but I mean, there were female leaders, monarchs.
Yeah, but not priests.
Right, but priest or priest.
I mean, look at the Catholic Church in general. Do they have female figureheads?
No, they only have homosexual ones. You're correct about that.
Well, yeah. No, yeah,
you're right.
I mean, that's
and
a different
also
point.
they.
But I also think that's a good way. What's that?
The Catholic Church, you're right. They have kept women out, and it's only been criminal child molesters. You're right. I mean, it would be an amazing thing
you can say
to be ruled by Catholics.
I don't want to be ruled over by Catholics. I'm not saying I want to be ruled over by Catholics. I'm saying I'm telling you where this reaction is going. I'm saying I know this is how I see this reaction going. It's going to be an overreaction. There's going to be an overreaction because we've gotten so far into disarray. What's that?
I actually agree with that.
Yeah, so no, I know. I think I'm not stating clearly where I'm coming from. So I'm not trying to push against you here. I'm trying to kind of give my Christian perspective in why I agree with you on certain ways, but also why I kind of differ in terms of people's ability to truly define the terms that are used in our culture today. I don't think there is a political situation. So I think the real situation is this cultural bombardment that Ye is doing. Like we basically have to open up new avenues of conversation. We have to start dealing with things objectively, things such as dual nationals serving in our government, things such as why is it that a certain group has control of our media and what effects does that lead to? And I mean, what it ultimately comes down to is their intent behind it. Is there malice in the control that's been implemented? Is it just extra work and a bit of nepotism and being actually more intelligent and being better at those jobs? Or is there ill will? And so those are the real questions.
I think that would be difficult to fulfill. I don't see things that I care about being advanced by Christian nationalism, but I heard you out, and thanks for your comments.
Oh, no problem, buddy.
All right, Pat.
Hey, how you doing, Richard? So,
so my comment. Pat, good to see you. How did?
Yeah, well,
you're quite a character.
Trying to change. Yeah. Well, my take on
how are the Jets doing this year, man? They're doing too good. It almost makes me think I'm going to be living in heaven on earth here for a second. I mean, what do they have, a winning record? That's almost sacrilege. I mean, I love them to death since I was a kid, but oh my God. They should be giving me a heart attack. That's what I'm used to. Okay, sorry.
but anyways, my whole take on the Fuentes thing is this, that we're reviewing it through the wrong prism. Essentially what Nick Fuentes is a red Indian Mayan in whiteface. And so you really see the kind of the history of Latinx racism kind of come out in Fuentes, in that it's not really the Anglo-American conception that where undesirable races are kind of segregated and kept out of the general population, but are neutralized through integration, especially the blood. Like it reminds me much of I think it transfers definitely to like whitenization in Brazil. It's like branqueamento or something, where miscegenation was actually encouraged because it was seen as a way to eliminate the Negro. And in many ways, and there also was something called the Junta de Raison. I'm probably hardly mispronouncing that, but it was called the People of Reason during colonial Spain. And these were people who were considered Hispanicized, mostly mestizo, who were, able to conform to Catholicism and the Spanish monarchy. And you're kind of seeing that in Fuentes, in that he's very racist against blacks. He's anti-Semitic, but he's almost doing a spiritual whitenization of them. He's bringing them into the Christian nationalist fold, and this neutralizes their negativity, and almost like a spiritual kind of miscegenation. But
yeah, look, I see a lot. I actually see a lot of what you're saying. This is something that I've talked about before. We didn't see it as much in the midterms, but this remarkable influx of Hispanics into MAGA and the Republican Party. And you could kind of say, oh, wow, it makes no sense or something. But there kind of is a sense to it. And yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. It would be curious. I don't know enough about Fuentes. I don't know how the degree to which his Hispanic, if you want to use that term, heritage affects him. Certainly the Catholicism does. I mean, I do think that this kind of like ultimately ends up in Christian nationalism. Given enough time, it will ultimately end up just asserting crazy Christianity. And you see this over and over. It's like, when Trump ran in 2015 and 2016, there was clearly a kind of white, and you could say Anglo-Protestant quality to his campaign with build the wall, keep them out, Americans are dreamers too, all this kind of stuff. And it's interesting how it emerged ultimately at the end of the day as this Christian, and in many ways, Christian Zionist cult, where, even the people who kind of hung on to Trumpism and said, well, it's the best we have or whatever, they weren't nearly as kind of dedicated and influential as Christians were. So what was influential about Trump, say, post-2018? It was QAnon. It was the religious right who opposed him at the beginning, to a large degree at least, not entirely, but then became the most fanatical supporters. I mean, they were literally speaking in tongues on his behalf. And they claim that he is the greatest president ever, even though he didn't do the stuff that he promised. But what made him the greatest president ever? He developed this cult around him. He was their guy. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem, etc. And so it ends up almost inevitably in this Christianity. And it's kind of interesting with Nick Fuentes because, look, you can obviously comb through his hundreds or thousands of hours of live streaming and kind of say, oh, look, he's a white nationalist. He is pretty much just like David Duke, just, younger. But isn't it interesting that, however authentic that was, and I think it was fairly authentic, it just kind of ends up in being articulated as we need more Catholicism.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of going back to, my central view of American history is this. Americans' hyper-religiosity, various other things about hyper-capitalism, the kind of stagnation of culture fits much more with Latin America than it does with Europe. I mean, surely if you look at 19th century America, you saw that was a republic, had various slave revolts and, revolts by liberals. It looked much more like the history of Brazil than it did like any European country. So that's kind of what this is kind of going back to, is that the hyper Christianity that's essentially what binds us. In the same way it binds Brazil. So having people assimilate into Christianity, that's really the only way you can really have a stable society. And I think
Yes.
MTG, she's stupid and all that, but she does represent something, I'll actually say, very stabilizing and very intelligent, because she's almost bridging racial fears amongst the uneducated white southern population and white in general. By being somebody they can relate to, about this new world and kind of bring them up into this. So I do think that's kind of what's going on. Is that the liberals in a lot of different ways are actually destabilizers. Although they're the elite, although they're in high culture, they're not really of the culture. And that makes sense. Of the wider culture, they're not really from the things they believe are really imported from Europe. And they're trying to force this new thing onto America, and it's just not working. And we're kind of seeing the cracks in the system.
Yeah.
But
yeah, no, I think I agree with a lot of much of what you said. Yeah, I've never thought of it that way. I think it's interesting to compare America to Latin America. That seems to be almost a better analog than comparing it to European societies. I agree. Comparing it to Russia is also an interesting case. There are massive continental countries with a concept of the frontier. But yeah, it's almost like once the frontier ended, we're almost becoming more Latin American than we are European.
I mean, what's fascinating about Russia is that the Siberian peoples that they conquered and kind of did away with, they did away with it much in the same way the American Indians did. And of course, the American Indians' closest relatives are the same Siberian peoples.
Yeah.
And the way I look at the 20th century is essentially, I don't think World War I really ever really truly ended until this collapse of the Soviet Union. It's almost like this, when you throw a rock into a pool, there's this giant like ripple wave that comes right out of it. That rock is essentially thrown into Belgium, and then over the next 80 years, just rippled right across the world. And so it went from the center of Europe, and now, 70 years later, you have the two like new colony countries. Like that's actually what Russia is. It's not really, they try to make it like an ancient country, but really most of that land was in Ukraine or Belarus.
Right.
It's really a novel country, much like America. So now you have these two like very large nations of Europeans, newly settled, not much less history than say France or Germany, and much less like there's the different areas of Russia have far less cultural difference than the different areas of Germany. And America is almost like entirely homogenous. So like the two arms of Europe that kind of stretched right out, kind of like attacking each other during the Cold War.
Yeah,
it was something very schizophrenic. I mean, it kind of goes back to like you look at the last 2 centuries. I don't mean to ramble like this, but
no.
You look at the last 2 centuries of from about the Congress of Vienna to about the fall of the Soviet Union. All of our philosophy was in German, and you saw in the same way, during the Age of the Enlightenment, all our philosophy was in French, and that kind of ended the French Revolution. But in Germany, it was different. There was different currents. You had the left and the right. Of course, you had Das Kapital, all that on the left, and then on the right, you had Nietzsche going down, all that.
Yeah.
So it was almost like instead of where, as during the French Revolution, all differences complement each other. During, I guess, the age of German philosophy, it was very at war and almost kind of really led to this kind of destruction and rubble.
It ended up in the, actual division of Germany as well. Maybe kind of fitting in some ways. You had the Marxist half and maybe not quite the Nietzschean half, but yeah, you get the picture.
Yeah,
no, I totally. I mean, look, I remember one of my professors said the last battle between the old and young Hegelians occurred at Stalingrad. That actually generated shockwaves when I was studying Hegel. It's very true.
I mean, ultimately, the difference between the left and the far left and far right. I mean,
stuff. Yeah, they just think in terms of like national interest or something. They don't appreciate the degree to which the last battle between Hegelians occurred at Stalingrad. Like they don't understand that ideas have consequences.
No, and I think it's something about Americans. I once read something by Mencken. He basically said that like we don't understand that politics have consequences. If they can nobody can get hurt. So it's almost like a game, and I think it's so dangerous because I think, like you said, alluded before, on another space, that people are opening up boxes that they don't know what's gonna come out of, and you see the Supreme Court almost implicitly endorsing the independent state legislature theory. I don't see how that doesn't lead to some kind of at least some kind of like the Troubles type civil unrest. I mean,
yeah,
we're definitely in some kind of. I mean, you said something before. I feel like we're in almost like the concert of Vienna. The concert of Europe. Metternich Europe, where it's like we don't really know what's coming next. We're just kind of sitting around waiting for something to happen.
I agree. No, very good comments.
Yeah, that's just my spiel. So you can go on the next person.
Yeah. All right. Let's do one or two more, and then I'm going to call it a night and get some work done. I think. Okay. So, N, you are very obsessed with getting on. Bill for Christ.
Hello. Yes. Great to be speaking with you, Richard. So I have a couple of quick questions for you on Ukraine. And I know that's something that we're both probably really interested in. But I'm sure you saw, I believe it was yesterday, President Zelensky banned the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine. And he's still allowed the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. So what do you think is going to happen as a result of that?
I'm going to mute. Okay, I think I'm... Okay. That was hilarious. Okay. So what do I think about that?
Yeah, just what do you think is going to happen as a consequence of that? I guess is my
probably
question.
A good and necessary move. I mean, I don't understand all these criticisms of Zelensky for banning the Communist Party and controlling the airwaves during wartime. I mean, that's just an absolute necessity. The Russian Orthodox Church is a arm of the state. I mean, I don't think you could plausibly allow some kind of antagonistic entity within your borders particularly where you're fighting a war.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that's fair. I mean, if you're at war, you want to ban parties that are against you, and I don't see that as super authoritarian or a bad thing or anything like that. But at the same time, I think that when you start to ban ideas, and like you were just talking about, it starts to, I think it sets a really bad precedent. Because I mean, why should, I know we're looking at it from the perspective of the state of Ukraine, but if you look at it from the perspective of the people in Ukraine, why should they be forced to worship in one church rather than the other? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. And look, Ukraine was genuinely divided. I mean, I think a lot of, maybe more is made over some of those election returns from 2014 or something, where you just had this geographic distribution between Yanukovych and who was this? I forgot who he ran against. And when did he run? Was that in 2012? Or is 2014?
It was
when he ran?
A while ago.
Yeah. I forgot who he ran against. I need to go read up on this, but you can see these geographic distributions, and you can even see kind of religious distributions as well, where Catholicism's leaning west, Russian Orthodoxy is leaning east, and the east of the country is leaning east or towards Yanukovych. I mean, maybe too much could be made of such things, but it is a real factor. And I don't know how to solve that issue, but if I were Zelensky, I would absolutely ban the Russian Orthodox Church. I mean, I can't believe it took him this long. And I would absolutely ban the Communist Party, for God's sake, and control the airwaves and have nothing on the airwaves that is even conceivably demoralizing.
Yeah.
So therefore, no dissent or so on. I mean, again, it's kind of brutal, and we don't like this for good reason. But you know, when you enter a stage of a existential crisis, I mean, you know, you can't. You're a football team and you're in the huddle. You're like, this is the play we're running, and then someone's like, well, what is a play really? And is this, you know, you're like, all right, get this guy off the field. You know, we got to win, and you have to make a decision and understand that you're in a really serious situation. Yeah, banning ideas. Look, all of these things can have bad consequences, but you know, everything can have bad consequences. I don't think there's no reason to believe that Zelensky would have done this in peacetime. Okay, I am going to move on just because I am going to. So I'll get a few people. Let's keep everything quick. Yugi Muto, you've been raising your hand for a while. You have the floor. Go.
Okay, yeah. So I had a question about this whole Ye thing. Like, I think Ye is a reasonably interesting
Yugi.
candidate. Yeah. Hello? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, you're raising your hand, but you just need to speak.
Wait, you can't hear me? I'm talking right now. Like,
all right.
Can anybody else hear?
Media saboteur.
Wait, can you seriously not hear me? Here.
Hey,
you got the floor. Hey.
So I'll make it quick. I have 2 points though that I wanted to get your take on.
Sure.
One with Fuentes. I think it's useful to kind of get a look at the long game when looking at the whole Fuentes Kanye kind of thing. Everybody seems to have kind of a grasp on what's happening here, and with Kanye, we're witnessing kind of like the equivalent of a homeless dude taking a dump in front of people in public, whereby his depression is manifesting itself in the highest of EQ type of fashion that exists. And you know, you get this spark of creative madness that's going on with him in that way, and we all get to be entertained by it. And you know, that manifests in him or himself with Milo Fuentes, and you know, the Fuentes influence. I think the real important figure in this whole thing is Fuentes, because you know, like I said, Kanye's just doing his thing. That'll fizzle out. That'll do what it does. His influence kind of matriculates down to Fuentes, and Fuentes is the real winner out of this, whereby he can be analogized. His influence can be analogized to a snowball, you know, and the snowball will of course expand to the size relative to the abundance of snow in its immediate proximity.
Right.
And you know, one sec it might be rolling on a barren sidewalk with no snow, and that could be easily analogized to the last like 3 or 5 years when he's been mass banned across mass media, social media, and everyone's kind of had to pretend they don't know who he is. But more and more, it's becoming apparent that everyone will know who he is. Everyone does know who he is. They're just still
but see, there are problems to that. And in some ways, this is part of my own experience because, I mean, first off, CPAC knew who he was very early on, and he started getting banned from CPAC as, I don't know, maybe 2018, maybe certainly 2019, 2020.
Right.
And you can't make an excuse that you don't know who he is. So, you know, he can have this Groyper army and he can have friends like Ali Alexander or whatever, but that you're in a very, if you want to be a political actor, you're in a very difficult situation. And so sometimes these things, I mean, I get the snowball analogy, of course, but like sometimes these things can get big and go back. I mean, look,
he won't merely have a snowball. He won't merely be a snowman by the time he's 35, 36 at the age to run. He's going to be a full on avalanche by then. All Kanye's influence has done to him is just release density around this, you know, analogous snowball.
I agree with that to some extent. I'm trying not to be like anyone to accuse me of jealousy or something. How is all of this going to work? I mean, you know, like,
it's counterproductive to even try to predict it. You don't even, like, smart businessmen don't forecast past 5 years for this reason. And it's even kind of dumb to forecast into 5 years for this reason. But I think politics is a little different.
Months.
Exactly. So with politics, though, I think it is
forecast 5 months.
Forecast 5 months for what? Business? What do you mean?
No, I mean, look, I get what you're saying. It's just kind of like you need to understand the difficulty of doing this. I would say that what Fuentes has going for him is that if you drop the Holocaust revisionism and overt racism, etc.,
he's in his 20s, though. That's the one thing he has going for him. So both of those things that you just mentioned, and I think you cut out. I don't know what happened there. But
I did cut out. Someone called me. Yeah. What Nick has going for him is that the way he articulates things is actually really attractive to a large part of the Republican base. Now, I'm not saying that Holocaust revisionism is attractive to them, or that overt racism, or Catholic dictatorship or whatever, but like he is a kind of hyper conservative in a way that I am, to make a obvious comparison, not. So,
well, it's fine that he does it, though. He's in his 20s. That I'm telling you, he's in his 20s. Like, he can get away with it.
He can't have his own fan base without the hyper Catholicism and Holocaust revisionism and so on. So he's in a kind of tough bind. And I don't know. I mean, look, I think there is going to be authentic, what Ye represents is real and authentic and powerful, but it's easier. All this stuff is easier said than done. I mean, you're going to have to get actually pragmatic at some point. And Fuentes, yes, he is now a household name, but relying on a support base of his fans is difficult. Now, having a billionaire on your side, that's hugely powerful. But at the same time, I mean, I guess I'm a little more sober about these things now, a few days later. I mean, you could make a very strong case that this whole thing is headed for disaster.
Yeah, and actually, this is the last point. This is the second point and final point I was going to pitch to you on this. I want to get your thoughts on. So that perfectly leads into it. With Donald Trump's recent kind of assertion of suspending the Constitution, I think I didn't even read the press release. Oh, and by the way, Kirstie Alley just died. I don't know if anyone knows. That's big news right now. She just died. Okay. But anyway, that's a. But so
I remember
Donald
Cheers.
Trump.
That was a fun show.
Yeah, definitely. Freaking It Takes Two. I think that's when I knew. Anyway, back to the suspending of the Constitution. What I really think he's leading on here, what he really means is suspending liberties, which I think is, we have two historical examples of where that worked very well. One, Napoleon did it in France, leading up to his implementation to the rights of man, and it worked. He got France's new civil code in place while these suspensions were implemented. And among those suspensions were Jews were relegated down to certain professions. They couldn't participate in banking. They couldn't participate in, what was the other thing? Well, they couldn't participate in lending and usury, and they couldn't participate in, there was something else. It might have even been medical. The other time it happened was here in the United States under John Adams, of course, with the Alienation and Sedition Act, whereby liberties were suspended and you couldn't talk shit about the government, or you were headed to jail. And you also, of course, you couldn't talk bad about the government. And then mass deportations were like, Madison had free reign to do that. Then, of course, Jefferson later pardoned everyone who was impugned under those legal steps. But these are 2 points in history where such measures did work, a suspension of liberties. for the meantime, while maybe a convention of states is happening in this case. Like, who knows
Right.
who knows what that would mean.
I think the MAGA people want this kind of stuff. He's not talking about suspending liberties. I mean, he wants to be elected president. I mean, let's not project something on him that's not there. And there is no question an effort going on among conservatives to, have a new constitution or something to the state legislatures, which they could legally do.
Yo, Big Spence, how's it going, man?
Stuff.
So you can tell by my profile picture, it's Tony Tiger cooking crack. So I'm a big nigger proponent.
All right, that guy.
Oh, this guy.
Gone. Okay, Alberto, you can speak.
Hi. Yeah. Internet and ideology. That guy really got me thinking. Was William Luther Pierce actually an anti-Semite? Was George Lincoln Rockwell actually a racist? I'm not sure if he ever articulated that. Yeah, it just struck me the lie.
He's a smart guy, and he's also he's very polite. I think he's good natured, but yeah, he gives a new definition to the word charitable reading of someone.
Yeah.
But I don't want to diss him actually, because he's very polite and he's clearly smart and good natured. So
yeah, but I feel like that's kind of the danger of like Nick Fuentes when Alex asked him if you're a white nationalist, and he just said with no hesitation, no. That was just the biggest lie I've heard in my life.
Which was kind of a setup. But the thing is, what Alex Jones just wants to do is deflect everything. So he's like, you're not a Nazi like George Soros, who rounded up Jews and killed them. Or like everything is this just weird, like, it's not a serious point. And it's this weird way of deflecting so that, no one calls them Nazis. But the one thing that I appreciated about Kay, I keep calling him Kay. Gosh, I called him Kanye forever, and then now I've conflated them. The interesting thing about what Ye did is that he just kind of had none of it, because he's like, are you a Nazi like George Soros? Did you kill 6 million Jews? Ye, did you? And Ye's like, Alex, like, Hitler was cool, right? Like it was, he just like blew away all of this just stupid conservative deflection. There's almost like some like great thing about that.
Yeah, he gives them every opportunity to deflect and, well, you're not really a Nazi, right? No, Hitler was cool. He did a lot of good stuff, man.
Right. He was really funded by the British, and the Nazis are in charge of the World Economic Forum. It's just like, shut up.
Ugh.
So dumb. Every conservative there, it's like the essence of like middle intelligence where you're too cute by half. You try to come up with some weird, just like obviously fraudulent, like overly complicated game. And, people who are both less intelligent than you and more intelligent are just like, listen, man, like, just no, stop talking like this. This is absurd. And I don't think Alex Jones is a Nazi, to be frank. I think he actually is kind of, I think he comes out of the Ron Paul era. And I think he believes in all these conspiracy theories, like genuinely, but I think he also believes that we could go back to the Constitution, quote unquote, and that these things would just kind of vanish into thin air or something. I that's how I would describe him. I genuinely don't think he's an actual National Socialist. I have no idea about Ye. I mean, I don't know him well enough, but I don't know. I mean, he's obviously fascinated by these things, but I don't think we really know enough about him to really say, like, what would he actually do? What does he really want? You can't just keep telling people, go read the Bible. At one point he was like paraphrasing Genesis 1 or something, and it's like, okay, yes, man, man, he created them, man and woman, he created them. Okay, great. But like, what is your point? Like, what do you actually want? I don't know. I don't know if he's just fascinated by Jesus and Hitler as kind of like the ultimate historical celebrities in some level.
It's perfectly possible. I mean, Bowie did say Hitler was like the first rock star, but I mean,
and that's
Alex
true.
Jones. Yeah, it is. It is definitely.
Images of fans reacting to Hitler, including teenage girls, and fans reacting to the Beatles 20 years later. It's remarkable. I'm definitely not the first one to point this out. He kind of was the first celebrity in the modern sense.
Yeah, and
maybe that's what resonates with Kanye.
Yeah, I remember when you were on Alex Jones. That was funny enough. That was the question he asked you. I think he said at one point, "Do you like Hitler?"
Uh-huh.
And Kanye, you gave a smart deflection of, well, he was a figure from history.
Right.
We can, and obviously Kanye had a completely different answer to that question.
Yes. Anyway, all right, guys. I'm sorry if I didn't get to you. But I am going to put a bookmark in this. I went an hour longer than I thought I would. I thought this would be quick, but these usually just last a lot more than that. All right, gents, I appreciate your, well, Yugi, don't cry when I gave you the floor and you didn't say anything. Or maybe do cry. Anyway, I'll do these more often. Okay, guys, good talking with you, and I will see you later.
Have a good night.
Bye.